Olá, pessoal. Estamos aqui para mais uma mesa do Relampeio. Esse festival está sendo lindo. Quem assistiu a última mesa viu como foi maravilhosa a mesa com a Kine. E nós estamos aqui para agora com a entrevista com o Francesco Verso, que vai ser entrevistado pelo Fábio Fernandes e o Waldson de Souza. Mas antes eu queria lembrar vocês sobre os projetos que a gente está tentando ajudar aqui com o Festival Relampeio. O projeto que nós estamos tentando destacar nesse dia é o projeto Sobrevivendo ao Coronavírus. Então, é um projeto que surgiu para tentar auxiliar as pessoas de baixa renda que estão sofrendo com todo os problemas que o isolamento social e mesmo a doença está trazendo, não só para o Brasil, mas para o mundo inteiro. Então, é um projeto que mapeia as famílias que vão ser assistidas e, com as doações, eles estão comprando comida, comprando mantimentos, medicamentos, para que essas pessoas consigam sobreviver da melhor forma possível. Então, aqui na descrição do canal, vocês têm as informações para fazer as suas doações e também no site, que é o relampeio.com.br, tem uma parte que é a parte social, então é só clicar lá, eles têm o PicPay, também tem conta no Banco do Brasil, tem conta no Nubank, então quem quiser, quem puder ajudar, vai ser muito bom para essas famílias e também para que a gente consiga cada vez mais combater não só a pandemia em si, mas também os resultados, todos esses resultados horrorosos que a gente está vendo. Então, vou começar apresentando o entrevistado, o Francesco Verso, é escritor e editor italiano de ficção científica. Ele recebeu inúmeros prêmios, sendo editor da Future Fiction, e publicou as obras Idol, Lívido, Bloodbusters e Caminatori, produzido a partir de The Bulldogs e Nomadland. Os livros Lívido e Bloodbuster foram vertidos ao inglês por Sally McCurry e publicados na China, nos Estados Unidos e no Reino Unido. Como editor da Future Fiction, editora multicultural, publica o melhor da ficção científica, com tradução em 9 idiomas, em mais de 20 países, com autores como James P. Kelly, Ian MacDonald, Pen Song, Ken Liu Cixin, Pat Cadigan, Fábio Fernandes, que está aqui com a gente, Xia Jia, Vandana Singh, Chen Yufan, Difícil, e outros. E aqui para entrevistá-lo nós temos o Fábio Fernandes, que nasceu no Rio de Janeiro em 66, mas vive em São Paulo, trabalhando como professor universitário. Traduziu muitos livros, entre eles as versões conhecidas de Laranja Mecânica, Homem no Castelo Alto e Belas Maldições. E também autora, suas histórias foram publicadas no Brasil, também no exterior. Entre os seus livros estão a coleção de contos Interface com Vampiro e os romances Os Dias da Peste e Back in the USSR. Ele estudou na Clarion West, que todo mundo conhece, uma grande escola de escritores nos Estados Unidos, com Samuel Delany, querido Samuel Delany, e o Neil Gaiman como seus professores. Ele ganhou por 3 vezes o prêmio Argos de Literatura Fantástica, também editado lá fora, e também editou lá fora com Francesco Verso, que está aqui com a gente, a antologia Solar Punk, Sorry for my Italian, Francesco, Come ho imparato ad amare il futuro, em italiano, e com Gibril Al-Ayad, a antologia We See a Different Frontier, em inglês. Ele lançou em italiano a coletânea de contos Limitatori, em 2016. Em 2021 vai lançar o seu primeiro livro solo em inglês, Love and Archaeology, pela Luna Publishing Press. E nós temos aqui também o Waldson de Souza, que é brasiliense, formado em letras e mestre em literatura pela Universidade de Brasília. No mestrado, ele escreveu a dissertação intitulada Afrofuturismo, o futuro ancestral na literatura brasileira contemporânea. Seus trabalhos acadêmicos abordam questões sobre afrofuturismo, ficção especulativa e autoria negra. É autor de Oceanic, pela Dani Blanche, de Eletricidade em Suas Veias, presentes na coletânea Vislumbres de um Futuro Amargo, da agência Amag, e do conto Uma Esfera para Cada Feitiço, publicado na Mafagafo número 3. Então vamos começar com as perguntas. The first question is from Fábio. So Fábio, please, you can do your first question.
Okay. Well, for starters, let me thanks a lot the organization of the Relampeio, you, Petê, Ana, Rushi, Jana, Kali, the translators here right now, Iana and Santiago. It's a pleasure and it's an honor to be here. It's been 2 days. We'll have a third day tomorrow, and awesome talks with awesome people, and I'm very, very proud and very glad to be here. I met Francesco a few years back, and I'm also honored to be here to talking with him to you, the Brazilian and abroad audience. First, Francesco, welcome here to Brazil, even if it's online only for now. And let me tell you one question. You already know what I'm going to tell you. You are a champion of the subgenre known as solar punk. Could you explain to our audience what exactly is solar punk? What we think is solar punk? What's your vision about solar punk? Of what kind of future are we speaking when we speak of solar punk?
Okay, thank you, everybody. It's really great to be here. I'm big debt with Fábio and Ana for all the organization to set up this really amazing set of panels. Especially, I like the fact that it's in 3 languages, and so a special thank to the people behind the scenes who are making the translation available. And it's a pleasure to be here among fellow science fiction fans, authors, experts. So let's hit it with solar punk. Solar punk is something that struck me some years ago. First of all, it struck me because it was born in Brazil. And so for once, a genre that is rising and coming from a non-English country. So already my antennas were pointed. And then I realized that I was an unaware solar punk writer, because many of the ideas that I will tell you were already circulating in my veins, in my thoughts. So I just needed to make them blossom. Solar punk emerges from this kind of environment where nihilism and cynicism and the kind of vision of the future made of namely multinational corporativism, exploitation of any kind of resource, namely, the post-cyberpunk scenarios that we have seen emerging and becoming more and more part of our present as an answer, or a kind of, let's say, an exit strategy to the current affairs, to the current situation that we are living. So it is not just a movement in literature, but it also covers some other parts of society, like design, architecture, politics, the way we use resources, the way we distribute revenues. So altogether, it is an all-around vision of the future. It is not a vision of the future that insists on the negative side, but tries to struggle to find solutions for the current situation and the problem we live in the post-capitalistic societies. Not just the Westerns, but also the developing countries, for example. And instead of just pointing the finger and saying, like the cyberpunk, much of the cyberpunk said, this is not going wrong, this is not going right. If this goes on, we will probably self-destroy ourselves. Oh, this is not the way to do it. Oh, all this kind of negative approach or negative vision. Solarpunk tries to say, what can we fix? What can we adjust? What can we change? What must we remove as an obstacle to the development of a human society? So basically, it is founded on some pillars. I will mention briefly the let me say the 4 pillars. The first one, of course, is biomimicry. That means that we can imitate nature in the best patterns, in the best solution that it has already found over the course of millions of years of evolution to use those, applying to our life and make it our own. Another one is a kind of resilience. And for resilience, which is a term that lately is being used very much, I think that is a kind of opposition to negative forces that are trying to push you. So you kind of develop some ways to change, adapt, but still be yourself, okay? Especially in relation to community-based resilience. For example, where a new aqueduct or a new, oil pipe wants to cross a territory, in the name of capitalism, in the name of making new money, you have to find a way to resist, or a night-speed train like we have in Italy, in our territory, connecting parts of Europe. Another pillar is radical inclusivity. That means that we have to not just look at the places where we have always been looking, not to listen to the stories that we've always been listening, but trying to include as many people, as many communities as possible. And here the metaphor is very simple. Just like the sun touches everybody, the poor, the rich, the black and the white, we have to include every kind of person to our conversation. And the other one, of course, is very simple, is sustainability. Capitalism has proven to work out in some ways to rise the economy of many countries, but in the long term, it proved to fail in especially 2 ways. One is redistribution of income. So it accumulates money in one part of the world, in one part of the society, and deprives all the others. And the other is not paying back what it uses as resources. That means externalities. So in the long term, capitalism as it is today, it is not sustainable. So at the end of the day, these kind of stories which just are emerging from developing countries and developed countries now, like the US, for example, also, of course, are trying to find positive, hopeful, and collaborative approach to reality, trying to get out of the classic cyberpunk scenario that we have seen in, William Gibson novels, or in many, The Matrix or Strange Days, where there is, a fight in the name of money, in the name of individualism, in the name of power. And it's always this kind of cynical kind of, the end will end tomorrow, so who cares? I will get as much as I can and leave. So the kind of fiction in cyberpunk is quite different, and I could go on for hours on this, so I will just cut it short. But you see that there is a big difference in the approach towards the future.
Okay.
That's okay.
For now, yes.
Now we're gonna bring the Waldson question, but first in Portuguese, then I will translate it for you, okay?
Boa tarde para todo mundo que está acompanhando a gente. Eu vou fazer a pergunta em português, depois o Petê vai traduzir. E eu também quero agradecer antes a organização do evento, né, por ter me convidado para participar, e dizer que é uma honra estar aqui. Eu sei que o Francesco já explicou os 4 pilares, né, do conceito de solarpunk, mas aí acaba que quando o conceito chega no senso comum, ele acaba passando mais pela questão da sustentabilidade, né? Então, a minha pergunta é a seguinte: é possível estabelecer uma aproximação conceitual entre o afrofuturismo e o solarpunk, o que seria, nas palavras de Rob Cameron, um afro-solarpunk? Justamente porque uma das formas de se trabalhar o afrofuturismo pode ser através da construção de futuros utópicos para pessoas negras, ou resolver os problemas que a gente tem aqui hoje. E aí, como eu mencionei, a noção básica do solarpunk é voltada para o desenvolvimento de um mundo sustentável e com condições de vida positivas, né, opondo-se à distopia. Mas dentro de uma perspectiva afrofuturista, pessoas negras já vivem em um contexto distópico desde o apocalipse causado pela colonização. Sendo assim, o afro-solarpunk, bem como o afrofuturismo, não poderia desconsiderar esse fator. E aí, chegando na pergunta mesmo, Francesco, como podemos, então, alinhar o afrofuturismo e o afro-solarpunk para pensarmos não apenas em futuros sustentáveis, mas também em futuros sem racismo, sexismo, LGBTfobia, capacitismo e outras formas de opressão? E, mais especificamente, o que produções de solarpunk até agora têm feito em termos de justiça social?
Also made a comment about the sustainability in the beginning, and the question is the following. Is it possible to establish a conceptual approach between Afrofuturism and solarpunk, which would be, in the words of Rob Cameron, an Afro-solarpunk, precisely because one of the ways of working Afrofuturism can be through the construction of utopian futures for Black people. And the basic notion of solarpunk is focused on the development of a sustainable world with positive living conditions, opposing dystopia. But within an Afrofuturism perspective, Black people already live in a dystopian context since the apocalypse caused by colonization. Therefore, the Afro-solarpunk as well as Afrofuturism could not disregard this factor. The question is, how then can we align Afrofuturism and solarpunk to think not only about sustainable futures, but also about futures without racism, sexism, LGBTphobia, capacitism, and other forms of oppression? What have solarpunk productions done in terms of social justice?
Well, it's a very, very difficult question, and I wish I really had a simple solution. But this level of problems require, a very, a lot of energy and a lot of different kind of changes in the way we perceive reality. So let me address the issue in this way. I think that the link between solarpunk and Afrofuturism could be inclusivity. And let me tell you also that I make a clear distinction between Afrofuturism and African science fiction. Afrofuturism was born in the 60s and the 70s in the US. It was born from the music of Sun Ra and Grace Jones and the books of Samuel Delany, and lately with the development brought by new generation of science fiction authors like Nnedi Okorafor, for example. So this is Afrofuturism. When we talk about that, is mainly a US phenomenon. Another thing is African science fiction, because first of all, if you don't speak or write in English, you're out of this picture. So if you write in another language, it's difficult to get your voice on that chariot. So I think that we have to include. This is the point, because as some years ago, more than 30 years ago, William Gibson said, "The future is already here, but it is not evenly distributed." Right? Well, I think that this phrase doesn't apply anymore to our present time, because when I spoke to Ian McDonald some years ago, he said, "Well, when a new device comes out on the market, name it an iPad or an iPhone or PS5 now, this device is immediately available in Beijing, in Mumbai, in Rome, in Tokyo, in Rio de Janeiro, in Los Angeles. Everybody gets the same technology, okay? So what's the difference? The difference is that different people make with technology a different thing depending on their culture. So for example, if you get an iPad in Nigeria, you have a bandwidth that is a tenth, a hundredth of what is in Los Angeles. So you have to completely rewrite all your applications to use that phone. So the infrastructure around you changes the way you do things. If you are in Mumbai and you have a 3D printer, you probably don't use the same materials and the same amount of energy to make a prosthetic for a kid or a nurse or anybody that lost an arm or a leg, and you do 3D printing cool and fashionable prosthetics in the US or in South Africa, like remember the famous athlete that was running on blades. I don't remember his name. So that means that, for example, in Brazil, you use social network probably to communicate with marginalized communities in the Amazons, not to organize the latest political caucus in Los Angeles or in New York. So that means that different cultures use technology differently, and that's where science fiction becomes important. That's where you have to tell the stories of the people that are not being included in the international conversation, and that's where solarpunk can help and join forces with Afrofuturism or African science fiction. Because one thing is to have a fight for your rights at the moment, Black Lives Matter all over the world. But another thing is to have problems in Nigeria at the moment or in Zimbabwe at the moment. The two levels of problems are completely different. So we have to just look at the broader vision of the world and understand that also these kind of problems are part of the science fiction world and must be included in the conversation. And to include them, we have to look and scout and search for these stories and these authors, which are probably invisible on the wider market. In Nigeria, they speak in English, but many other countries, they don't. And also, then we will go into the problem of translation. It is not really, if it's your first language, it's okay. But if it's not, then it's not fair to ask a writer to write in a secondary language to get to the market, for example. I hope that answered the question. At the moment, Solarpunk, of course, is trying to find a way to produce more and more stories. For example, in one of my novels called, The Walkers, I Camminatori, I've imagined nanotechnology that can lower the amount of food that we use. So these nanotechnology assemble proteins, vitamins, and carbohydrates. So we don't need to eat 2 or 3 times a day, but we can eat once a month. And with that little change, group of people decide that the life they do in Rome and in an urban environment is not worthwhile anymore. The work they do is so lousy and shitty gig economy work. The kind of food, it comes from a supermarket, from industrial agriculture. So they decide that they can quit completely and abandon the city and start repopulate places that we lost, we just left centuries ago, when the drive for industrialization was so strong that we all moved to the city for the illusion of a better lifestyle. I think that lifestyle in the cities reached a peak some maybe 20 or 30 years ago. Now we are just getting along, getting used, but the quality of life in cities, in many metropolis, many of the sprawl in cyberpunk, it's going down very fast. And then so I imagine a counter-urbanization. And people using 3D printing, using ubiquitous computing, using solar panels, they can just 3D print their tent or their house every week, every 2 months, and going in like a rock tour, visiting their community every season. So it's a kind of completely different lifestyle. I think this is, of course, a futuristic vision, but it calls for many changes in the way we perceive reality and what we can change and what we should keep, especially in this moment with the coronavirus, when we have a chance, a big moment of disruptive tissue of our present time. So we can decide that maybe as we are developing our tech skills to connect with each other, we are resilient at the moment. We are resilient. We are opposing the coronavirus, showing that we can still connect to each other. This is one way.
Okay, great. Are you listening to me?
Yes.
Yes. We have some problems with the sound in YouTube. So I will ask you to, when you're not talking, please to mute the phone, okay? We have some problems. Okay. So we arrived in the part 2 of our interview, and now Fábio's questions again about the role of publishing stories from different places and translating in science fiction. Só falar em português rapidinho, né? A importância da publicação de histórias diferentes em lugares e a tradução de ficção científica. Agora com o Fábio Fernandes.
Okay, so the interesting thing in this panel is that one question really leads to another. So you were answering Waldson right now about sustainability, and now I'm talking to you about radical inclusivity. And radical inclusivity is also language inclusivity, right? As you were telling us right now. And so I'm going to ask you about this, about translation, about how to get into the market when English is not our primary language. It's not even our secondary. When we met in Rome, you gave me a brilliant piece of advice regarding writing in English. You told me that maybe I should avoid writing in English, and I should instead to keep writing the stories in Portuguese, so I could have them translated. This is an awesome piece of advice, really, and I know for sure that many of our listeners, our watchers, right now in the audience, are keen to listen to more about this. Could you care to elaborate more to Brazilian writers who want to publish in English or other languages?
Sure. Let me tell you a couple of stories about this. I was at the festival in Nantes, the Utopia, and I was sitting in a panel about European science fiction. And the interviewer asked, what can we do to improve the situation with European story, science fiction, acceptance and everything. And one English writer, and he said, well, you should write in English. And I was puzzled because I started to ask myself, what would happen to my identity? What would happen to my background? What would happen to our history? What would happen to the things that happen just in Italy, that have a name in Italy? Should I have to completely give up myself to comply with the standards of the English and American market to sell more? Should I have to change the way I think and behave and my vision of the world to get there? Do I have to write about young adults now just because it's trendy in their market? Do I have to change the dragons into androids just because it's fashionable at the moment? Do I have to use politically correctness just because otherwise I will not get there? Or maybe do I have to, check what's the latest algorithm saying from Google or Amazon that is currently hitting the market on their genre or the top 10. Is this really the future of science fiction? I don't think so. And so I believe that we should be the best we can in our country, in our own language. And let me tell you, you probably all know about football, right? You are Brazilians. So if you want to go to the Champions League, you have to win your championship. You have to win your national championship. So for the writers to go to the Champions League, you first have to be good in Portuguese. If you first have to be published in your own market, be the top quality and a recognized author in your country, then you can go and play on a bigger market. Also because it's not that the English or American writers are waiting for us. They have their own writers and market. And on a wider market, it's not that, yes, there are more readers, but there is a lot more competition, thousands of books, more books. Everybody's publishing in English. So you are competing with a much, much wider selection of stories. But you want to write better, right? And I think that the best way to write is your language. It's your identity, is what you know, your experience. And let me tell you another funny story. Some years ago, I was in a bookstore with Lawrence Ferlinghetti. You maybe know he is a legendary bookseller and publisher of City Lights, who went actually to jail for the publication of The Owl, the poem by Allen Ginsberg. And the interviewer asked me, "Oh, Mr. Ferlinghetti, what do you think about writing curses?" And Mr. Ferlinghetti just fell silent for 1 minute. Nobody knew, what happened. And then, in one moment, he said, "Do you think that Lord Byron would have gone to a creative writing course?" And then it was like, oh my God, So of course it can help you, but a writer is somebody that creates his own rules, breaks them. Of course, you can follow your mentor. You can follow the authors. You can read the people that make you cry and happy and give you all your emotions on the pages. But at the end of the day, if you want to be a writer, you don't have to use the shortcut. You have to follow the path, and the path is made of books, pages. Making your hands hurt or making your mind go crazy on how to fix that problem. There's no shortcut, and that's the only poor, lousy advice I could keep.
Oh, it's a very sound piece of advice. Thank you.
To the next question,
We
I would
don't
like
hear you.
to ask Waldson if he wants to comment the answer Francesco gave to his question, because you are a specialist of Afrofuturism and you have a broad knowledge of the arts here in Brazil and abroad too. So maybe you can or you wish to make some considerations. If you want to make it in short in Portuguese, I can translate after. But we're gonna make.
Eu posso tentar em inglês também, mas eu não sei se fica muito bom.
Tenta em inglês. Qualquer coisa eu vou fazer uma consecutiva se você não se sentir seguro.
Okay, so commenting the first answer, and as a good Brazilian, I have to say sorry for my bad English before I begin. And when I think about the difference of what would be African science fiction and African futurism, I don't know if it is my main concern, but I think more about how Black authors work with fantasy and science fiction and horror too, and I know that Afrofuturism born in USA, but the movement became to Brazil recently, and we already have works here. And I think in terms of name a kind of production that is specifically because we have another concern in our literature, and is a good thing because we can see another ways to work with the same gender that white people are doing. So I think that my question was more about, and I think that the last part was not answered well, because I think that there was missing the part when I asked about the production of the actual production of solar punk, because the problem that I see is, and Francesco explained, that is not about just not about place, but about people too. But when I get the books, I will see Black people and non-white people in these histories, the stories that already was published in Solar Punk. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but that concern is in the concept, and I get it. But when I read the works in Solar Punk, there really is diversity, or is just in the concept? Because, and I know that you said this is a really new concept, and but I think because I think when people think about solar punk, we still focus more on the sustainability. That is my impression, and that is.
Because representativity matters. So when we see these books, and they bring us a vision that is not our vision, and so it's when we start to talk about Afrofuturism and this new movement, not so new, but this new movement. We want to see ourselves there, but when we understand we are not there, it's kind of difficult to swallow the thing, you know, to buy the story.
Yeah.
And so,
well, this is a very difficult matter. Okay. I'll try to be clear. It's difficult. It requires really a full roundtable on this. So in some parts, you want to be represented, but in some other parts, you want to really be exotic. So, for example, we as human beings, in a way, we want to see ourselves into this. But on the other side, we want to discover also another thing, another reality. So, for example, when I buy a book, do I always have to care about the gender, the authorship, the place of the author, where it was born, when it was born? Do I always have to check and pass all this checklist? If William Gibson is white, is born in Canada, and is like 70 years old now, should I not read him anymore because of who he is? I think, first of all, we have to judge the quality of the things, the quality of the thinking. Then it comes the problem of being represented. Of course, William Gibson doesn't represent me. I mean, I was born in Italy. He talks about future Tokyo, or kind of, how can I be represented? I mean, I don't know nothing about geek culture of the 90s. But when I got the book and read the what he was writing about, the way he was writing, I was just hooked and completely devastated. He completely changed my perception. I didn't care where he was coming from. If that was Chinese, American, or man or woman, I would be blown away in any case. So this is one thing. Another thing is to select the best stories available, not on the of course, all the checklist, but to scout and to go and look for the best possible stories from a wider pool of stories. So let me tell you another metaphor. At the moment, the US and English-speaking countries market is like a little pond, a little lake. They're sitting on the shore with their stick and fishing very big, nice, juicy fishes. They are satisfied with that. But if you want to find the white whale, if you want to go and find the really incredible fishes, you have to go on the ocean. And to go on the ocean, you need a boat. And this boat is a translator. The translator knows how to go on the high sea and bring back the fishes because you know the language, you know the culture. He studied the destination where it's going, so he can take back something. But at the moment, we don't use boats. We just sit on the lake and take the fishes. So that's the problem of representation that Waldson is talking about. If you always fish in the same pond, you get always the same kind of fish. So you don't get biodiversity. So how can the genre evolve if you're always in that pool? It could be different, of course. It could include minorities, ethnicities, all this diversity that we're talking about. But anyway, you are on the English language. And that means we are talking about probably 500 million people. We are not talking about 7 billion people. So what I call is an action to use translations more, because I think it was just Ludwig Wittgenstein. He said, the limits of my language is the limit of my world. Yeah. So that says a lot. If you read just from people from your own language, and I don't mean the translation, of course, we read in translation, but if we read people from other languages, we get the histories, the background, the identity, the diversity, we get the richness, we get their point of view, we get their vision of the future. Otherwise, we are just limited with the vision of the future with a bunch of people that are raised differently, but in the same environment. That's why I make a different point from Afrofuturism to African science fiction, because of course there is an issue. Nobody's denying that. But one thing, if there's 7 or 10 generation Black American that is raised in American culture with American, industry, movies, Hollywood's business way, everything. Another thing is to be born in South Africa, okay? That plays or in India, where they even speak English, with a completely different world, a completely different idea of what the future should imply. This is my answer. Okay, I hope it's answered the question now.
Okay, it's a very deep question because the things we're denied to our people are not just in literature, but in every part of the society. But
of course,
but it's so deep that we need 10 hours of panel to discuss.
Yeah, of course, that's why. But let me just add a little bit of the approach. When I went to, I've read many anthologies of solar punk, so this answers also Waldson issue. Most of these anthologies, of course, except for the Brazilian one, were published in the US, and there was no translation, even though some people are, I don't know, coming from India, or some people come from, I don't know, other countries, but they were writing in English. There is no translation in none of them. When I engaged Fábio to be the co-editor of the Solar Punk anthology, I said, I want the people to write in their own language. It's my problem as a publisher to translate. I don't have to put the burden of the translation on the writer. The writer has to think. The writer has to write. The writer has to do the best possible story. He doesn't have to think, oh my God, how do I have to write that in English? Oh, do I have to take care of the reader? Who is the reader? I mean, I don't care about the reader. The reader is non-existent. The reader is an algorithm made by Amazon or Google. I have to care about the best possible stories I can get from the selection. And if I widen my selection, and I said to Fábio, bring me people from Brazil, bring me people from South America. We included 2 stories from Brazil, Ana Rusha and I forgot, Renan
Bernard.
Renan, yes. And we included two people from Argentina, Gustavo Bondoni and Maria Teresa de Echeverria. So I wanted a representation of the world. We included people from China, France, Spain, and I had 7 translation from 7 languages and covering 14 countries. What did I do strange? If you translate from English, you can find translation from Spanish, from French. It's not so difficult. It's just that I don't know why. I really don't know why they don't do it. I'm not saying that you have to translate from Hindu or from, a very difficult language, but at least have the, 4 or 5 main languages. You cover most of the world.
Okay. I remember a quote of Georg Steiner, and I looked up here, and he said, "Every language is a world. Without translation, we would inhabit parishes bordering on silence." It's wonderful. So we need to think about translation as this barrier breaker.
Yes.
Every time we talk about diversity, I think we should think about translation as a barrier breaker. Yeah. Okay, very good. Então agora o Waldson vai fazer a segunda pergunta dele. So Waldson will make his second question. Okay.
I will try to do English once I started. And
Great.
I will read the question. It is characteristics of science fiction to approach themes such as oppression, prejudice, difference, contact with the others, colonialism, etc. However, we observe these themes being mostly told by white authors, mainly straight men, cisgender, and without disability. Establish a worldwide perspective, we notice that science fiction is dominated by American and European authors, with the homogeneous profile sometimes that is reflected in the characters. And in Brazilian context, the scenario is not different. Our literary market has similar problems regarding the lack of representation of minority groups. So, Francesco, in your opinion, how can the publication and translation of works from marginalized other countries and narrative told by different voice contribute to rethink science fiction, the convention of the genre? And what is the role of publishers in creating a less Eurocentric scenario? And I know that you already answered some part of these questions, but the problem is when you begin to translation author from another country, and I think when we begin to translation author from Brazil, we can see that is white authors. So in a country with 54% of Black people, we will see the same concerns and the same scenario here. And even if we get there in other countries with translation, I think the profile would be more white.
Okay. Again, I have a couple of observations here. The first one is about the 3% problem, just to start. The 3% problem comes from a study made by the Rochester University that says that 97% of what is published in the US market is coming from the English language. 3% is coming from non-English language. And in that 3% are included all the languages of the world. So can you imagine the level of openness in the market, okay? And I'm talking about all the market, not science fiction. This is what they do. And sometimes when you speak with people in the US, they will say, oh, but I don't like translation. It's not the original language. I want to read the original language. So I struck, and said, what if we do that? Because in our markets, like 50% or 60% of what we read is translated from English. So if we do apply the same strategy to them, stop reading English translation and look for other languages, maybe we will have a better representation of the market. So what can we do? The only thing that we can do is place our money somewhere else. This is the only choice we have. We have no other choice. We have to change the system bottom up. It will never change top down. You see it with all the revolution, they kind of say evolution, don't say revolution. They start from the bottom. They start from people having a new desire, a new need. I'm fed up of reading the same thing. I started future fiction because I was going to Italian bookstores, and in the shelves of science fiction, I was reading always the same kind of book, namely a book written by a white American man that was unfortunately even dead by 30 years, because we don't have even many translations, and all the translations are from one language. So I asked myself, what happened to the rest of the world? Is it possible to represent the future of this planet just from one point of view, one economy, one religion, one lifestyle? And that's what started me. And in 7 years, I published 160 stories from more than 20 countries and translation from 9 languages. And I am nobody. I did it without any money at all. So it's possible. Publishers have a big responsibility in this because they are cultural intermediary. So as long as they treat literature like pens or slippers or any other kind of commodity, they don't make a good service to their clients, because literature is not pants. Literature has a kind of complexity, and it revolves around art that if you treat it like any other good, it doesn't work. So the problem we see now is that literature is going more and more into an industry, which is actually an art craft, I think. Because as long as the algorithm will not choose the stories, we are in charge of taking care of our stories, the readers, the translators, the scouters, the publishers, everybody that is involved in the field. Through aggregation of choices, we change reality. That's the only way I know that, without, of course, any violence and any revolution, this is the democratic way of changing things. Making the people aware there is more behind the shiny billboard. There is more. That's the way I found stories. I don't look at the shiny billboard. That's for big publishers. They will go and see, oh, who is the number one? Okay, I don't care about that. That's another industry. I'm doing another job. A more like cultural job, if I might say so.
Well, very good, very good. And talking about translation in other worlds, Carol Chiovato, who was in the last panel or the panel before with Thomas, talked the following. I love Ursula Le Guin in the world for the world is forest, because he talks about the translators as a god, someone who introduces a change, enabling a communication between things which before do not communicate. So
it's a bridge. Yes, it's a bridge. It's a channel. It's a network.
Yeah. Yes.
Is a door, is anything that connects 2 points.
So I think we could start with the questions from the people in the YouTube, and Fábio and Waldson, if you have something to say to Francesco about these things, we have some time. We have some time.
Okay. In fact, I have one more question. May I ask it now, or should I wait later?
I think you can make your comments now, and then I make the questions from the audience.
Okay. Thank you. No, just one thing. Walking back to the beginning of our talk, would you say, please feel free to answer it the way you want, or even to not answer. Do you think the Brazilian are uniquely suited to write solarpunk?
Why uniquely? No, nobody's unique. We are all unique. No, I think you have. Yeah, sure. I think I love the fact that solarpunk was born in Brazil, and I would like to know more. I really would like to know the mythical Lodi Ribeiro, Gerson Lodi Ribeiro. I would like to know how he managed to find the first stories, even though it's difficult, and how it came along. This is for a future, let's say, program or future festival on solarpunk. We will track the roots and involve other things. But I think Brazil sits in a very well positioned because of the multi-ethnicity, multi-futures that converge and live together. So you have a natural, unfortunately, a natural conflict in this, but also you have a natural solution, because I think you are maybe one of the few countries that managed to create. Of course, there are problems. I'm not denying, and of course, there are a lot of problems in the accessibility and all the things. But we haven't seen. I think there is a level of cooperation that you can work on. So if and inclusivity, the fact that you have many roots in your country, I think it's a very good starting point. And you have also geographically a position that puts you in a very good, a very good position to explore the application of sustainability with the biodiversity you have in the Amazon, with all the rivers and the different kind of environments you have from north to south. You have a fantastic world to explore there. You really have all the setting ready to work. I mean, I don't know if it was with you and we were talking about Tupinipunk. Was it with you? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So I think that with all the past and the natives and the the culture that you have a striking a whole encyclopedia of stories that you could write about solarpunk in Brazil. I wish I was there, actually.
So do we.
But of course, you can. The thing is that solarpunk is not about just utopian future where everything works fine. Okay, there is always a conflict. There is a number of conflict that solarpunk tries to manage, tries to find some acceptable solution, negotiate. Is about a political trade-off. So it's not easy. Nobody is going to give us the future easily and for free. We will have to fight for that. So that is calling for another kind of fight. Think about Greta Thunberg. Okay, another kind of fight for new generation, a fight for invisible generation, people that have no voice because they're not born, plants, animals, other kind of populations that are not not even invited to the discussion, right?
Okay.
Great.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
Waldson, do you have something?
No, I don't have any more questions, and I'm happy with the answers. I just like to add that right now we have a new movement that is born. It's so new that began the last year, that is called Sertão Punk, and was created by Gabriel Diniz and Alan Sá. And that is great because it's based on the production of the authors from the northwest of Brazil, but it's really, really new, and we have a few things published yet, but I personally think that it is a great movement that we looking up and maybe translated to another countries.
Can you send me some stories?
Yes, of course.
Good.
Great. So let's start with the questions from the public, from the audience. Someone need to translate. So, okay. Paulo Vinicius asked to Francesco, thinking on questions of solar punk, dealing more with the macro. He remembered a film which translates for him a feeling he would like to see in this gender. The film is The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. Is there some space for this kind of more micro, more intimate stories in the gender, in the solar punk?
No, of course. When I say inclusivity, I mean that there is no kind of exclusivity. So it's not about this cannot be done, or this the only standard is quality, is originality, is a level of writing and maturity in the way you tell the story. So of course any subject is possible. When I was quoting Lawrence Ferlinghetti, it's exactly because we shouldn't be so worried about politically correctness. I mean, art is going against. Art is a kind of critic, is a kind of consciousness, is a kind of awareness. So I published everything that I think valuable and that it adds something to my sensibility, to my knowledge, to my awareness. So there's absolutely no obstacle in that, no problem at all.
Okay, another question is from Wilker Martins. Do you think artificial consciousness is going to help us in a future good solar punk, or could get us to dystopian scenarios like cyborg, mutant exclusion, or human species elimination?
I think there is a problem with the bias. I mean, who writes the script, who programs the algorithm. So as long as the access to this strength and power is, given to the usual names, the usual ethnical group, then of course we have a problem. So again, we have to, accessibility. If we don't put different people there with different names and different nationalities and different genders, then of course we'll always get the same result. So it's always the story of who's telling the story and for whom. So you follow the money and you find the responsible, right? So it comes from that. Again, there is space to change. especially in this moment. And of course, if you want to go and sell your story to that market, absolutely that market, then of course you have to follow their rules. But I try to show that we can change the rules of the game. We can completely rewrite the conditions. And if you think that your story is good, but it doesn't find a market, then create that market and create that thing. I think it's the only way. When I want to tell you this. Maybe I'm going, rambling, and it's not answering exactly the question. But the thing is that we have the power to influence at least our community. When I was in Belfast last year for the Eurocon, I won the award as Best Publisher, European Science Fiction Award for Best Publisher. When I received the award, I was really very, very happy and very excited. And I said, I hope that I will see the day when we will have an Asian Science Fiction Award, when we will have an African Science Fiction Award, when we will have a South American Science Fiction Award at the Worldcon. Because how is it possible that they do not include other continents, other countries, other nationalities? I think it is the time. The time is completely right to have this discussion at the Worldcon level. And so I think I'm really calling this. So if somebody is hearing, it's time to do it, because all the other countries are alive and ready. They have their stories, they have their authors, they have the background, they have everything. So it's time to acknowledge this and give space, apart from the Nebula and the Yugo, which everybody loves. But it's also time to dedicate some time, a panel, an award for emerging and hopefully, consistently publishing countries in the future. So that's my take.
Okay, thank you. Bruno Anselmini asked about the situation, the scenario of the Italian science fiction and the fantastic genre in general, and if you have some authors to recommend to us.
Okay. Yeah, this is another panel, Italian science fiction, but I'll try to be short. We have a long tradition of fantastic. We created fantastic literature from, Dante, Boccaccio, Ariosto, and all the names, right? From but it was not science fiction. But we also had important science fiction writers like Primo Levi, for example. They wrote really beautiful, even 20 or 30 years before the New Wave and Philip K. Dick. I'm talking about 1930, 1940. So at the moment, the situation is that there are some very good authors which struggle to be translated, because the burden of the translation is on us. And for example, if I take my situation, it took me, and here's another index to show you. Think about how much time it takes for an English written book to be translated in 20 languages, and how much time it takes for a non-English written book to be translated into another 1 or 2 languages. It's probably never, in many cases. So it took me 8 years to be translated. So the problem, of course, is this, that there are excellent authors. We now, let's say, are developing the same kind of science fiction that it's written everywhere else. We had some problems maybe 20 or 30 years ago related to the access of information, the spreading of the web and all these things. So maybe there was some some kind of different approach. We were more to the social and cultural and political part than to the hard science fiction, for example, okay? But at the moment, it's not like that, and there is a selection of authors. I'd like to mention one which I managed to sell to the US market, which is Clelia Farris, and her anthology called Creative Surgery will be published by Rosarium Publishing with our friend Bill Campbell this year in September. There is Dario Tonani, who is being published in Japan and some other things in English. He writes more about space opera and kind of steampunk in the future, in the space. And another, of course, I've been translated in some books of mine. So yeah, you can find not much, but you can find some authors.
Okay. Priscilla Sackman asked, how solarpunk treats revolution?
Well, let me put it in this way. Revolutions have never helped the population. Never. Revolution have always led to massacre, blood, to even worse conditions for the population. So I would prefer to use the word evolution to evolve our society, to make the people aware and to have a change without violence. We have seen enough of revolutions which led to even worse, political situations. And I think it's time that as a global awareness now, as we do now, the emergence of a kind of dictatorship in the US, kind of lack of sensibility and respect for the basic constitutional rights for which people have been, have died. Now the people are standing up again. And I'm sorry that people are not doing that also in other parts of the world, which are affected just as much as this kind of police brutality. So I hope that these changes will not be paid in blood. Well, let me say that's what solarpunk tries to do. It tries to find cooperative solutions, kind of find peaceful solutions, trying to work on the negotiation. Of course, it will not come, as I said before, easily. But I call for the involvement of women, call for the involvement of people that are less aggressive. So we have to change all these kind of standards that we have at the moment. It must be maybe slowly change, but we have to start doing it now, not in the future. We have many chances to do it now.
Okay, thank you. Fábio, Waldson, if you have some comments on the questions, or if you have something to answer, please feel free, okay? We have some time. So the next one here is from Paulo Vinicius dos Santos. In this post-pandemic world, is there space to think on solarpunk stories, or better, do we need to think on solarpunk stories in this post-pandemic world?
Oh, thank you. This is a really important question. Yes. I think about the storytelling we see and read every day by the media. Well, the storytelling is strange. I mean, at least in Italy, commercials have changed a lot. Commercials now are all solidarity, give to the others, donate, be good, behave. While like 3 months ago, nobody cared about this, But is it really like that? I mean, there are, even this strange behavior of capitalism that tries to get everything inside turn it into a good. So isn't even this kind of altruism another good of capitalism that tries to sell itself to the people? Very risky. So I think we have to really change the way the media are trying to sell us another good. And if you see the storytelling is really, trying to rise the control, trying to lower the freedom, cyber surveillance, tracking the distance, social distance. In all this is leading and going into the dystopian future of 1984, right? But it's even exactly in this moment that we have to try to. I'm not saying disobey in a way that not to comply with the stanza. I'm not saying that, but we have to be aware that this is a kind of strategy, and the idea is, it is exactly in the moment when the things go wrong that we have to be hopeful, try to cooperate, but not as they want, as we want, as the people are trying to gather and create communities. So that's where solar punk comes in the picture, because for example, let me think. They want to sell us again another apocalyptic scenario. They want to sell us again and control us again. But while maybe it's not, I'm not talking about specific cases. I'm talking in general about the storytelling. Okay, and so the real collaboration must come to that level, and try to. We have three options. One option is to keep the things that worked, change the things that didn't work well, and completely cancel the things that were disaster. So we have these three options. I don't know the percentage of the decisions that we'll make. Some people say that this will be even worse in the long term. I think instead that this can raise some awareness and trying to change the way we did the things, because there was some graffiti saying we cannot go back to normal, because normal was exactly the problem. And this is a typical solar punk thing. We have to develop our way of thinking out of the problem, which is not the way that they want us to think. It could be another thing. So we have to learn to live in this developing scenario, trying to learn the tools to understand this reality among fake news, among chat box and anti-fascism and all these things. It's really difficult times we're living in at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, let me see here. I just have a comment on another question, and I was thinking about that question too. Francesco, when you said revolution leads to massacre and bloodshed and so, but when we live in a society which pushes us on this kind of lack of humanity. We live here in Brazil. Here in Brazil. What we're suffering here is a lack of humanity from our government.
Yeah.
So how can we see a way out of real revolution to turn this everything upside down in order to start again? Because living like we are living here, and we are a Pacific people, very Pacific people, because for a tenth of what is happening here in Brazil, for a tenth, what is happening here in Brazil, French people was burning cars. So
yeah, I understand. You're too Pacific.
yeah, and I think revolution has a place. Unfortunately, must have a place, and there is a complement from this, from the question of the revolution, which is it possible to make art without claim revolution?
Is it possible to make art?
Make art without claim, without fight for revolution.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I totally agree. Yes, art is politic. Art is, I mean art with a capital A, and I totally agree. I don't know. I think revolution really is the ultimate solution. Really, the last resource, ultima ratio. It's the thing that will throw the country into really, look at the past, But of course, when reality is wrong, then wrong becomes right. So this is the thing. It's you feel the rightness inside of you, and that rightness calls for doing wrong to somebody. I hope I will never see it in Brazil, because I hope that through the next elections you will vote en masse for these situations to end. This is the tool that the citizens have. I think I know it's difficult, and even sometimes it can be manipulated and stuff like that. But this is the tool that the people revolted for. That's the people. That's why we had world wars, and that's why we get constitutions, and that's why we get civil rights, just for these reasons. But if capitalism can convince people that their right doesn't count, that they can be entertained through weapons of mass destruction, then they won completely. So I think that I hope that the new generations will not be looking at the screen all the time and see also what happens in the real world. And because yes, there is a high risk that we are giving up our future to a bunch of corporate multinationals that then they can get their hold on local governments. This is the way it works now with late post-capitalism. So that's why solar punk is also important to that, because we should go back to a community-based policy. We should get involved in policy. We should get passionate about it, because in the last 20, 30 years, the rise of consumerism and materialism has created a detachment to the ideology or the ideas. Everything was a trade-off between richness and, let's say, freedom and richness. I give you money, and you don't care about your freedom. I give you money, and you don't care about your freedom. That's the way it worked in many countries, like developing countries. That's the price you pay for development. So I hope that we can change the direction in that, and go back to some basic right behaviors. I'm calling voters. I'm talking.
Very good. Very good. Now, light question, and then the fire question.
Oh my God!
Here. And the light question is are there some Afrofuturist, Italian Afrofuturist authors?
Oh, I wish I could find them. I'm calling up now to whoever is listening. I'm selecting stories for a new volume of Solar Punk. So this is the thing. I am one and sometimes I have the help of Fábio with me selecting stories. So I have limited time, and I wish I could receive more stories. So I keep on looking. I look everywhere, but at the moment I haven't found. But my door is always open to excellent stories coming from many places, countries, languages, background, histories, cultures, whatever. So at the moment, I'm sorry.
Great. Se vocês viram aí, pessoal que está em casa, Francesco está caçando gente que escreve afrofuturismo. Eu acho importante a gente mostrar a nossa cara também. Fábio.
Posso acrescentar? Porque a gente vai coeditar um segundo volume, foi o que ele falou agora. Então é o seguinte, falem comigo, mandem para mim coisas. Tô querendo, tô procurando. Entendeu? Por favor, afrofuturismo, solarpunk, estamos aí. Só para falar rapidamente, no primeiro volume eu tive uma certa dificuldade de encontrar autores solarpunk em geral, tá? Confesso que eu não procurei com foco no afrofuturismo. Mas houve casos assim muito loucos, houve gente que recusou mandar, houve gente que falou que ia mandar, acabou não mandando, mas isso acontece, é normal, de prazo. E aí, na verdade, tinha vários autores e autoras, e só acabou sendo, no final, a Ana e o Renan. Então a gente quer muito mais. Por favor, mandem pra gente, falem comigo, falem com o Francesco também, não tem, vamos nessa.
Tô bem aqui, Fábio, se quiser eu mando.
Quero, claro. O Francesco já tinha pedido. Agora eu também peço, por favor.
Waldson, por favor, representa a gente. Francesco, before the fair question came another question. It's not so hard. So, is there a possibility of a world, a solarpunk world, a real solarpunk world, collective, pacific, fair, even with the past we have? And there is a connection with the two questions. With the past we have, is it possible to have this solarpunk world or this solarpunk idea implemented in the world?
Yeah, it is possible. It is absolutely possible. If you look back in our history, first of all, you will see that we are always being sustainable. We have started to be not sustainable since the first industrial revolution, since we boosted our economy using fossil fuel, using non-renewable resources. That give incredible boost to our productivity. But before that, we lived, we loved, we behaved, acted, and populated this world before. We had examples of cooperative, harmonic societies where, of course, there were conflicts, but not so big, wide. I have many examples. I could go on for hours, but we have examples even in Italy of Pacific. Some for some time. Of course, we are very fight with each other also. But I'm talking about the normal and acceptable level of fights. We have periods in Italian history where we had communities, Turkish people, Greek people. In Sicily, there was a blossom. We had Renaissance. It was tough time, but we didn't have this kind of crazy ideas of superiority. It come from modern time, and so I think we have to be careful in what kind of past we select, because we also have very good examples. Maybe they didn't last long, but we have to recreate the right conditions, at least to have a non-cynical, self-destructive society. That's the thing, because I hope that they are wrong, the scientists. I hope that the end of the world will not come with the Anthropocene, right? You all know the Anthropocene, the global, the geological age caused by human behavior. But there's another take. There is Capitalocene, which is the acceleration of the Anthropocene. If we use this system up to the very end, we will accelerate our self-destruction, because we're not taking care of nature capital. We are not taking care of human resources. It's just externalities. So this system is not proving right. And we have to find ways to run economy in a slightly different way, or in a radical different way. I don't know. I'm not in a position to give solutions. What I can do is imagine worlds that could be self-sustainable. And I do that through my books.
Okay, thank you. And now the last question, and I think a good one.
You don't want to do the hard one. Come on, let's do that.
That's the hard one. From Sergio Torlai. Sergio Torlai is curious to ask an Italian about what he feels, what you feel about this bizarre fascism burning, happening again, almost a century in another country. We are talking about Brazil. What an Italian feels seeing this bizarre fascism happening almost a century after it happened in Italy,
yeah.
Happening here in Brazil.
Well, yeah. Well, it is not hard. I mean, it's. I feel very, very sorry. Of course, the first thing is that I was thinking about Lula, and then all of a sudden Lula disappeared, and then there was this other, president. I don't know how it was elected. I have no information about that because they're so far away, and also the media is not treating Brazil as much as I would like all the countries to be represented. This is calls for, the problem I was saying before. We are a colony of the US. Many other countries are like that. So whatever Trump sneezes or farts or do whatever he do, we are covering that. But whatever happens to other countries, we don't know much. So of course I know pretty much what happens, and we talked with Fabio when he was in Rome. It was so sad, really, because I love Brazil and I love the multiculturality that you were able to come up with, to create. I even have to say that my first girlfriend was from Brazil. So I have wonderful memories, and I love the music. I love the football, the food, everything. But the problem is that maybe you as you said before, maybe some countries they're too mild, too kind, too gentle, and you didn't realize what was coming, and just like that, somebody can take the power, and you have no possibility to reverse that, to get that back. What I can say is that, we had fascism in Italy 100 years ago, and it took bloody war to get rid of that. We hanged the man at the end of the World War II, and it's painful. I say, I hope you will not have to face that kind of violent end, because it's really painful for many reasons. I hope you will get out quickly of this through another election, because there's so much involved. It's not just you. You are in a unique country. This is true for biodiversity, for many other things that revolve around the preservation of the forest. the equilibrium of the planet. So I don't know. I mean, if it was for me, I would call the United Nations and you know, I would have kind of you say the boycott, or try to, you know, get to the level, try to affect the political situation. You have to. The thing is that when you do wrong, there is no international force that can change that. You already do wrong, and that's it. So I think the internationally, the things are not working at all. We have a war just outside of Europe, which is going on for you know, many years. Nobody cares. They really, we see immigrant people by the thousands going out of Syria, from north of Africa, and nobody cares. And we are bombing them through multinational stuff. So we're not. They are not better off. I mean, Italy, they keep everything closed, but the situation is dramatic in many parts of the world. So I'm with you. What I can say is that I want to hear your voices, and I'm ready to, even though of course maybe you're not right optimistic, but try to work out any solution that can lead out of the current situation from Brazil. That's what I can do. Yes, sure.
Thank you. I think Waldson is out. I don't know, something happened there, but just to a brief comment. What we are more afraid of now is that we don't have an election in 2022.
Oh, okay.
That's our concern now, but at the same time, we are feeling too that the tides are changing, in the sense of people are trying to back to street to protest, to manifest, even with this situation of pandemics, and so we are trying to make like a bit like the Americans are doing now, going to the street to protest, to show our unhappiness and to show our concerns to the public. And we are being fought off with a lot of violence, government violence, police violence, but we are trying to tackle with everything the best way we can. And so I'm an optimistic, and I'm trying to see the silver lining of everything, but it's very hard. It's very hard, and it's great to have an external audience, people from abroad listening to this. We are living a very delicate situation here in Brazil, and so very delicate situation here in Brazil. But we're gonna come over it.
Yeah, I know the tides of the right wing are, you know, spreading. UK, US, and Brazil. Everybody's making this kind of association. Yeah, I don't know when the election should be.
2022.
So still 1 year.
Yeah, 2. So we are trying to deal with it, but it's very hard, and the military forces are steering up, and that's very dangerous for us. We live that dictatorship, and we know what is it. You also know what is a dictatorship, and we are very scared. More scared of not unveiled dictatorship, but a veiled dictatorship.
Yeah, sure.
Scares us more. Well, I think it's time. Thank you very much, Francesco, for your time. We know it's very late there, but so
no, it's okay.
We thank you a lot for your participation. Fábio, muito obrigado também pela sua participação. Gente, tem dois recadinhos, então, só para deixar bastante claro. Projeto Sobrevivendo ao Coronavírus, a gente quer muito ajudar mais esse projeto. Se vocês quiserem mais informações completas, está lá no relampeio.com.br/social. Tem outros projetos também, mas esse projeto é o que a gente destaca hoje. E também a programação de amanhã. Amanhã nós temos 2 mesas, uma às 13 horas, com a Elizabeth Kinway, dos Estados Unidos, com coordenação da Fernanda Castro, e quem vai participar é o professor Elton Furlaneto e o Sérgio Mota. E às 17, uma mesa com Neil Clark, também nos Estados Unidos, a mesa vai ser em inglês, com a coordenação da Jana Bianchi, e vão participar como moderadores a Ana Martino e o Jim Anotso. Então, muito obrigado a todos e até amanhã.